Okay, so week three. Week three is all about solving equations and inequalities. So this is going to be, you're going to be doing a lot of stuff this week. It's going to be a wide variety of things. This week is usually difficult, just as a forewarning. That doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means that there are some topics this week that are harder for some than others. So we're finishing up chapter 1. So we're doing 1.4, which is quadratic equations and applications. If you took MA104, then about half of the stuff in 1.4 you've done before. The other half will be new. Quadratic equations show up a lot. 1.4 is really important because you're going to be using that stuff for the rest of the term. 1.5 is complex numbers. I got a lot of questions about why you have to know that. That's used a lot in electrical engineering. So anybody who's going into electrical engineering, complex numbers pop up a lot. So you want to pay attention to. 1.6 is other types of equations. This is absolute value equations, radical equations, rational equations. I think those are the three. Rational equations we have to solve in week 6. So that's something that will pop up again. Radicals, where do those show up again? Because I know we have to do that. Where we have to square both sides. I don't remember which week those show up in, but they do show up again. Absolute value equations, those are usually some real-world applications. If you have an equation, you need to make sure that all of your answers are positive. That's the kind of equation you'll be solving there. 1.7 is linear inequalities. That's where you're looking for things that are greater than or less than, which is more relevant to the real-world things than just equal to. In business, a lot of times you're looking for when is my profit going to be larger than my cost, that sort of thing. And 1.8 is other types of inequalities, so that is polynomial inequalities and rational inequalities. And that kind of stuff pops up again when you get to calculus. So if you have to go on to calculus, this stuff will show up again. But there's a lot of different things that we're looking at, and so that's what makes it so hard for people. It's just there's a lot of different things we're solving. It's not necessarily that the steps themselves are difficult, it's keeping track of which method to use for which type of equation and being able to identify, oh, this is one type of equation, this is what I do. This is another one, this is what I do. And that's the more difficult part for people. So what can you use this in material for? So I already mentioned business applications when your profit exceeds cost. A lot of times in business, you're looking at inequalities. Construction area would be a quadratic formula. Anything squared is quadratic. So construction, projectiles actually follow quadratic formulas. So anything is sports, where you're shooting a basket, hitting a baseball, tossing a football, tennis, anything where you've got something that's going up into the air, that is all a quadratic equation. And so those these equations that we're solving, those govern real-world things. Ballistics is actually, there's a quadratic equation to govern like how fast a bullet goes and that sort of thing. So that is relevant to what we're learning this week. Speed involving currents, that's usually a rational equation. Currents, usually if you're going one direction versus the other, the current is either working with you or against you. So that often forms a rational equation, which then turns into a quadratic equation. Machinery and automation. So there are types of problems called work problems, which are rational. And those you use if you need to determine how long it will take multiple machines to complete a job. So sometimes you know, okay, it takes this machine this long to go make these like cars or something like that. So if I buy like 5 machines, how long will it take them then to go through the same amount of cars? And so that's good if you're in a company and you're trying to plan and you need to know how many machines you need. That's something that's useful. And then, as I mentioned, electrical engineering, complex numbers pop up a lot, and anything involving current. So a lot of this stuff is relevant. A lot of people, this is probably one of the weeks that most people say, when am I ever going to need this? And it shows up a lot more than you may think. So the biggest things you need to be able to do this week in order to learn the material is you're going to be doing a lot of solving of linear equations. So that pops up in 1.4, 1.5. Actually, a lot of these, they all boil down to linear equations at some point. You're going to be doing a lot of factoring, and you are going to be working with rational expressions. So those are the things that if you know you're a little weak in, you might have to go back and review, or at least get some extra practice in because you're going to be doing them again this week. And if you're not, if you can do them, you're just a little slow, you'll get better at it because you'll be doing it more this week. So you're going to be seeing those skills again. So this week is very similar to last week. Basically, the next weeks we're all going to be basically the same. You're going to have 4 things. You're going to have your discussion, the ungraded practice assignment, the assignment, and then a quiz or midterm, which will be next week. So let's talk about the discussion. This discussion is different from last week's discussion. You're getting a variety here. So last week is math-based. This one is more of a reflection. So you've basically got 2 parts to this. The first part is to reflect. So this is sort of aimed at reflecting after you've gone through this week's material. So I would suggest waiting till Saturday or Sunday after you've gone through and done some problems to answer it. But it says, which of the equations or inequalities this week did you enjoy solving the most and why? Which were the most challenging and why? So we're talking about, we've covering so much this week, and it's interesting to see what some people really struggle with and others love. That's what I always find interesting. Some people love solving quadratic equations and others hate it. So it's interesting to see how everybody has different opinions about the topics that we're covering. The second part then, because we have a minimum word count, is to provide an example. So there are different ways to do this. So did you come across problems in the text that you need help solving? If so, share them and ask for help. So this is meant if you're going through the practice problems. One thing, and I'm going to make sure I write this down, is do not share assignment or quiz questions. That should be obvious, but unfortunately some people don't think about it because they've taken the quiz and are like, okay, I'm done with the quiz. Can you show me how to do this? But the problem is not everybody has done it. Some people do it late. So do not share assignment or quiz questions. So you are going to want to find questions from the textbook. Probably the ungraded practice assignment is a good source for questions or examples. If there's an example in the textbook or a checkpoint that you're struggling with. If there aren't any problems like that you need help on, then you could try to find an example of your most challenging equation or inequality type being used in the real world. So that would require doing some research to say, okay, I really struggle on quadratic equations. Where are they used in the real world? Here's an example. So if you're going to do that part, you want to make sure that you say why it's interesting, and then you give the specific equation that is used in the situation, like actually write down the equation, what it looks like, and then of course include any sources that you used. So we've got a reflection going on. For your replies, if your classmate has a problem that was difficult to solve, help them solve that. If it's something that, oh, you know how to do this, help them out. You can reflect on the topics mentioned by your classmates. Do you agree with them? Do you have any tips to share regarding the most challenging topics for the week? So this is a good kind of let's check in and see where everybody's at sort of thing. So for the assignments, your ungraded practice assignment is the Chapter 1 end of chapter review exercises. So these are selected to be on the sections we're covering this week. So make sure that you're checking your answers, watching the videos on CalcView. If you need to, looking at the solutions on CalcChat. And then if you don't have a lot of time this week, because we're covering a lot, you can do the checkpoint exercises. That's at least another good way to get some practice. For your assignment this week, you should be, now we've had 2 assignments. They're all going to be same sort of style. You're going to have 10 problems to work out. Make sure you show your work, graded, hopefully you're getting used to the grading of your instructor. So if there are some instructors, well, they'll tell you, I can't grade this, you need to resubmit in a different format. So make sure you're actually checking your feedback and seeing what they say. Because some of them will ask you to resubmit. Some of them will, give you tips or maybe, tell you what you did wrong. So always check your feedback, both the feedback in the box and on the file itself. When you click on the assignment, if you go to Gradebook, you click on the name of it, you click on the score, it will actually bring up your entire assignment, and then you can see what was actually left on the file itself, because there's usually feedback in two different places. Sometimes some people leave feedback in the rubric, so I don't think we have a rubric for the assignments, so there's no rubric to worry about that. So just make sure you know where your feedback is and how to find it. So for the quiz, so now that you've had one experience at a quiz, you're going to start getting used to how this works. So there are 10 questions, timed at 1 hour. So you have to do them all in one sitting. And then you have to submit your work separately to a Dropbox. And then depending on your work, you may earn or lose points. Very few people lose points. That's only if there's indication of cheating, essentially. If you don't submit your work, you may get a 0 for the quiz. All changes to the score are done on the actual quiz, so you'll get a 0 for the Dropbox, and that's completely fine. The points were added to your score itself. And then, and then the Dropbox gets to score 0, just so that you know that it has been looked at. So if you, now that you've had one experience with the quiz and you kind of know what to expect, that can help you better prepare for the next quiz. So the topics covered this week are going to be last week's things. So you're going to be doing graphing, and I do recommend using Desmos to help you out with the graphing. That will make things go faster. Especially when you're analyzing graphs, looking for intercepts, domain, the shapes of them, their symmetry. You're going to be solving linear equations, analyzing equations, solving for the intercepts, finding the domain, testing for symmetry, those sort of things. Translating from English to math, so doing some vocabulary stuff. We've got slope of a line, which I highlighted because in the past that has been a little difficult for people. Equation of a line, and then linear models, which is also a little more difficult for people. So I highlighted those two as sort of difficult points, but that's everything that's going to be covered. So to study, definitely review your week 2 assignment, because essentially it's going to be similar techniques, similar skills. And then I have tried to find lots of practice here. So word problems are difficult for everybody. So I have several links here on word problems. Some of these are linear word problems. Some of these are not. Some of them involve translating first and then solving. So there's several word problem ones here, and I'm going to make sure to remember to put these in the YouTube link, YouTube description as well. And then translating mathematics is also very hard, because when you're doing word problems, you have to be able to translate first. So I have found lots of different practice problems on that in various different forms for variable expressions with 1 operation, 2 or 3 operation word problems, so equations, things with diagrams. So there's lots of different links here to help you out, because I know that translating is the most difficult part for people, and that's why word problems are so hard. And word problems are difficult just because there was a recent study that found that the way our brains are, where the way we communicate, our brain communicates when we do math, is different from the way we communicate when we work with English stuff or our language things. And they don't use the same neural pathways, which is why it's hard to do math word problems, because you're trying to get two things that connect that don't connect. Like if you think of the neural pathways as roads, you've got 2 roads that don't actually meet, and you're trying to use both at the same time. So that was it was a really fascinating study. I just learned about that about a month ago. But that's why word problems are difficult, and you have to basically train your brain how to get around that and how to work on learning things so that you can translate from the English to the math and being like, okay, just use my English part of the brain. Now that I know what I need to do, I need to take these key words and use those in the math part of the brain. So hopefully these links will help you study. Definitely look for practice problems that are similar to what was on the assignment, that sort of thing. And then, so the suggested schedule I have for all of this, let me zoom in here. So for the discussion, I recommend waiting until you've gone through some of the readings and stuff so that you can actually answer it based off of this week's work. To try to do a section a day, and then there are various videos associated with each thing. And then review exercises associated with each section so that you know, okay, these sections go with 1.4. And then the assignment is not quite in order because problem 1 just says solve, but so there's different ways, different types of equations to solve. So 1a is quadratic, but then the other types of solving is not until we go to 1.6. So you are going to jump around a little bit just by, because I was grouping things, we were grouping the assignment, all the solved problems together, so you can see how that works. And then for studying for the quiz, so I have some links. I told you to review your assignment. What I recommend is finding odd problems from the sections we looked at last week. Those can help you study as well. If you do ones that were not in the review exercises, if you do ones at the end of each chapter, that's a good way to study. So that is the overview for this week. Do you guys have any questions? Aaron, yes. Do you have a question? You can type it, or you can do verbal if you want.
Well, first I want to see if my mic is working.
It is working.
All right. I don't want to take a bunch of time away from other people's questions, so I'll start with this, and then we can switch over if we need to.
Okay.
They want you to go back to the recommended schedule. Yeah.
Okay, let me get that back up, share my screen. I figured like while I'm answering questions, like you might want to see my face, but we can definitely stare at the schedule.
Well, when I'm dealing with the textbook, I often find, and this is not unique to this textbook. I grew up with a math teacher, so the wording is often an issue. And I ran into a situation this week where I was just blown and going. Everything was fine, and then I hit a problem that really bothered me because, in my opinion,
hold on, my dog. I hear my dog on the bed, and I'm afraid I'm going to be right back.
Sure, go ahead. Go ahead.
All right, I'm back. I caught her just as she was about to fall off the bed. So,
oh no!
Yes, she's blind, so like she was sleeping, and I thought, okay, she'll be fine. And then when she wakes up, I'm like, oh, she doesn't know where she is. Okay, continue. All
right. Well, my problem was this gave me time to find it in the book in section 1.3, example 8. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I don't worry about this. This happens. It's just, difference of opinion maybe. But when it comes to the quizzes, this is going to be a problem if this kind of question shows up on a test or a quiz. And the reason this is important to me is because I actually have written an accounting package, and we had to deal with a problem like this. A lot of them, actually. But it's the example, so most people probably glossed over it, but I actually try to solve the examples before they tell me how. Yeah. So it's just a technique I use. Anyway, they say a store has $30,000 of inventory. Now, first of all, what's important about that is they did not specify whether that was $30,000 of inventory they've spent or that's 30,000 of inventory projected. Okay, so that was the first mistake, in my opinion. So I'm looking at that line going, okay, well, what do they mean by $30,000?
Mm-hmm.
After profit or before profit?
Mm-hmm.
Now, then they say the profit on a 24-inch television is 22%. Now, what's important about this is by saying on, if 30,000 represents the after profit amount, then the equation is x time. Well, it's got an x and a y. Okay, x is the amount of the 30,000 that represents the 24-inch, and y is the 50-inch. Okay, so the question is, what does x and y represent? Well, by saying the profit on a 24-inch television is 22%, then that means that x is the pre-profit value. So I need to do it's x times 122 equals, actually z times 122% equals x. And the problem is that after studying this and posting something on the forum, it became clear that what they meant to say was that the profit of the 24-inch television represents 22% of it. 30,000, the 22% is in the 32,000. So you need to go, you don't need to reverse it. See, when I deal with gasoline a lot, and in gasoline, the total has, let's say, a 10% tax. Well, what you have to do is calculate the 10% against the original amount that you don't know, and then work it backwards to get the total. So I do that, and the problem doesn't work. So then after posting, I realized what they meant to say is the profit of the 24-inch TV is 22% of the total, meaning that the $30,000 is made up of the 24-inch cost plus its profit represents 22% of the total, not against the gross value. Do you see how this becomes a mess?
Yeah. So so it makes it 1,000 is including the price of the TV plus whatever additional stuff, but it's not. It's just looking at the profit. Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I can't change the way it's worded in the textbook or anything. Part of this is well, the people who write textbooks are mathematicians, not business majors. So
Well, see, I was taught by a bunch of accountants on how to solve this kind of problem, and they would have told me, we don't know what you mean by the profit. Is the profit against the net or the gross?
And that's the other thing. I have done accounting. Uses math terms differently than mathematicians do. So that is one thing that also is a disconnect there, is they use the same words, but they mean different things.
And to me, this was fine if they had specified because percentages don't work two-way.
Right. Yeah.
So you've got to specify. Right, you got to know which way to run the math. 22% on the gross is not the same as saying take the total and take out 22% of the total. Yeah. And it turns out they wanted us to take, if I understand this correctly, they wanted us to say, okay, the 35% on the entire stock is the profit, and that's already calculated into the 30%. I don't know if that's true. I'm trying to remember. And see, that's where I started getting messed up, because I was trying to figure out how it was okay for them to represent the inventory of the 24-inch, the 50-inch as 30,000 minus X. Because 30,000, it represents the profit and the gross, but X is supposed to represent the gross.
Right.
So that didn't make any sense.
Yeah, it is worded. I totally see what you're saying. My advice, because we can't change.
Well, and I'm not worried about the book. I'm worried about the tests. That's what I'm worried about.
The tests, So my advice going forward when you hit things like this is don't try to read into, like, you're reading the words and being like, what does profit mean, and try to disconnect that from the numbers and take literally at the numbers and say we have 30,000 and that's 22% and 40%. and then, to try to disconnect from what the words themselves mean and focus on the actual numbers and the actions that are happening.
Well, and that's what I was looking for. If they had said $30,000 of inventory, 35% of that represents the profit. Of that profit, 22% is the 24-inch, and 40%, like that. If they had done it like that, I wouldn't have had a problem.
Yeah.
Because then I would have said, okay, so what they're saying is against the total.
Exactly. Yeah.
But since they said the profit on a 24-inch, I'm thinking, well, I need to do the 22% against the gross value, not the net value. Well, that turns the equation over, and so I wasn't able to solve the problem.
Yeah.
Because you got X plus X times 22, and then Y plus Y equals the total, and everything goes it equals then you have to do 35. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to have anything ambiguous on the test like that.
No, most of them, like there's the word problem. Now, the quizzes they pick random problems. So I can't guarantee you're not going to get something that seems ambiguous, but most of them, this is rare that this one is worded so weirdly. Most of them are a lot more straightforward.
Right.
So I think you should be okay. But if you do encounter something like that on the quiz, at least when on your work, make a note of how you interpreted it or something like that to kind of help get points. But the best thing that I can say is just try to tune out most of the words and look for the key things. 30,000. We have 22% and 40%, which usually means that you're adding. Try to look for those key words and try to avoid everything else and kind of take them out of your head.
No, and I was trying to do that, but do you see what I'm saying about even by doing that, I still don't have a good direction to take the percentages, and that's where I stalled out. Is because I was like, okay, well, which way am I going with these percentages? Is it 22% of 30,000, or is 22% on top of the original amount? I wasn't sure how to model the equation because of that.
Yeah.
So hopefully,
when I read this, it says the profit on a 24-inch television is 22%. So I think, okay, 22% of the 24-inch. So, and I'll say my 24-inch is a variable. So that's where I get 0.22x. So I don't even read it back to the 30,000. I just take each sentence by sentence. And then it says profit on a 50-inch is 40. So that gives me the 40.4y because that's the other TV. So that's that's how I
if we were doing the other problem, you could, because see, to me, what I hear when I see 22% on the 24-inch, I think the 24-inch gross, not the 24-inch net. Saying that let's say the 24-inch is $10,000. Well, 22% of that, because that's not usually how people run percentages on these kinds of things.
Well, I don't have that experience because I've not worked in a situation like that. But just coming from my math, I don't even think, I have to, I just think, whatever they tell me, it's 22% of this, and I don't worry about if it's gross or at cost or after it's been marked up, or I don't worry about any of that stuff. I just, I just say, okay, whatever it tells me it is, that's what it is.
All right. Well, I just wanted to check with that because I'm worried I'm going to get one on the test that is see, my biggest problem is just the ambiguity. As long as when there's percentages, as long as it's clear which way we're supposed to run the percentage, that's fine.
Yeah, but, most of the time when you have math problems that are word problems like this, when it gives you a percentage, you use that percentage unless it says you're increasing or decreasing by that percent. If you're increasing by 22%, then you would use the 1.22. Otherwise, use the percent. That's usually how all these problems are set up. Okay.
Well, I was just checking because I'd never heard a situation where you took a total, like say I spent $1,000, 22% of that was profit. The accountants will always say, well, the net was this amount, and then the profit was a percentage relative to the original amount, not to the total. The reference is never to the total. And so that threw me sideways on that one. So, okay.
Okay. Any other questions?
Yes, this is Ron. I have a question. My textbook doesn't have any numbers on it. Doesn't have any page numbers.
I know. I hate that.
Okay. Okay, so is that
Yeah,
normal?
it's normal for this publisher.
Okay.
Unfortunately, if you have the textbook through a different publisher, there are page numbers. It's all how each of them does their online system, and unfortunately, Cengage doesn't give page numbers. It drives me nuts because when I'm trying to refer somebody to something, I can't give a page number. I have to say, this section, this example, or I have to. It's harder to find.
Okay. Because I bought one, but it said it was an instructor copy, and that was before I found out that I was given a code from the Grantham bookstore.
Mm-hmm.
When I opened that one up, I was like, these look nothing alike, because the other one had page numbers.
Yeah. If you have a physical copy, it doesn't look this. The content is the same,
Yeah.
but the design of it is completely different.
Okay, that's all I have. I was just wondering.
Yeah, I know. I was like, that's my biggest complaint. It's like, why?
Oh, and since he talked about the book, do we?
Yeah.
I've got my advisor is supposed to be looking into this, but we have Cengage Unlimited, so we're supposed to be able to get a copy of these books for $8. But they need a course number that is a Cengage registered course number to do it.
Oh, so we may not be able to do that with our class because we're not using some classes have MindTap, which is like your assignments are also in the ebook in a way. And we're not doing that because it's not available for a textbook. So it may be possible because we're not doing that, you cannot get the $8 version for our textbook, and you might have to find it on Amazon or something.
All right, I was just checking.
Yeah, because I know, like, they say, oh yeah, you can get your textbooks for $8, but if it's asking for a course code, that's probably because we don't do any assignments in the textbook like some other classes. Are there any other questions out there? All right. So it doesn't look like there are any more questions. I'm assuming that now, David, you've had enough time to take a look at that suggested schedule that's been up there. It is definitely in all of the classrooms. All the PowerPoints are in the classroom. Everything I put is under the additional resources and live session link. It's near the bottom of the class. So everything is in there that is useful, and including links to other videos on topics for this week. So some videos for this week, there's 2 videos on quadratic equations. There's a video that I've done on solving linear inequalities, and then one on polynomial and rational inequalities. So I would almost recommend, before you go to the textbook for those particular sections, watch my videos, because that might be a more effective learning tool than trying to read it from the textbook. So that's what I would recommend. So I have videos for 1.4, 1.7, and 1.8. So for those sections, I would just rely on my videos that are linked in your in the classroom, and then use the textbook as a resource after that. Because I think that'll probably be more effective learning. They are long; they're like an hour long each, because I'm actually going through lessons. But I think that's probably more helpful for most people. So that's it. So thank you guys very much for joining me and coming with questions. I'm so glad that you guys came with questions. That's awesome. Good luck this week. Of course, you guys can email me and ask me questions. If it's something that I can't answer, I will tell you to ask your instructor. If it's something that's related to your grades or something like that. And good luck this week, and hopefully I'll see you guys all next week at 6 o'clock. So I will see you guys later.